The great obsidian spire of Cathar Prime pierced the roiling methane clouds of the capital, a shard of polished black stone so vast that its peak was a frozen myth in the stratosphere. Within its heart, in the sanctum of the Consortium High Council, silence reigned. It was a silence heavier than any metal, deeper than any void. Light from the swirling galactic hologram in the chamber's center cast long, skeletal shadows across the faces of the three beings who held the fate of 1,000 worlds in their clawed hands. The air, meticulously cycled and scented with the sacred incense of dried Cathar orchids, did nothing to soothe the tension that hummed like a strained power conduit. High Counselor Vorlag, his carapace the color of ancient, weathered granite, rested his 4 lower arms on the cool, dark surface of the council table. His 2 upper arms were crossed, a sign of deep and troubled thought. His multifaceted eyes, usually alight with the keen intelligence that had guided the consortium through countless crises, were now dull, fixated on the weeping nebula displayed in the hologram, the last known location of the 9th Expeditionary Fleet, a fleet that no longer existed. He felt the phantom weight of every soul lost, every vessel turned to incandescent dust, every proud Cathar warrior silenced in a single inexplicable moment. The data fragments are an insult to logic, Grand Marshal Xyler finally grated, his voice a low thunder that seemed to vibrate through the very stone of the chamber. He stood rigid, his ceremonial battle armor gleaming like freshly spilled blood under the hologram's light. His own carapace was a fiery crimson, unmarred by the political scars that defined Vorlag. Xyler was a creature of war, of directness, of overwhelming and irrefutable force. This was none of those things. A single vessel, the sensor ghosts paint a picture of something that violates every known principle of stellar dynamics and material science. It is not a ship, it is a paradox given form. Vorlag did not turn his gaze from the hologram. The nebula, a beautiful shroud for so much death, seemed to mock them with its silent, cosmic indifference. And yet, he murmured, his voice a dry rustle like leaves skittering across desert stone, the paradox was potent enough to unmake a fleet that could have pacified a star system, a fleet commanded by one of our finest, gone, not defeated, not rooted, erased. The third figure in the room, Lorekeeper Alara, remained seated in a recessed alcove, her form partially obscured by shadow. She was ancient, her chitinous shell faded to the color of bone and etched with the fine, swirling patterns of her station. She had outlived empires and witnessed the birth of stars. Her role was not to command or to legislate, but to remember, to see the patterns others missed. "You speak of its form," Alara said, her voice soft but resonant, carrying the weight of ages. "Describe it again, Grand Marshal, for the record of the ages must be precise, especially in the face of the impossible." Xyler made a sharp, percussive click with his mandibles, a sound of profound frustration. "It is a weapon that does not fire, a warship that does not move in any way our drives can comprehend. The few clear images we have show a sliver of something crystalline, a shard of frozen light that seems to bend space around it. It has no visible propulsion, no energy signature consistent with a reactor core, no weapon emplacements. When our fleet approached, it simply was. And when they engaged, as was their duty in the face of an unidentified and non-responsive entity in a contested sector, the void answered." He gestured with a sharp, bladed hand towards the nebula. "The logs from the rearmost scout just before it was consumed are chaos. Its sensors reported that our own energy beams did not impact. They unraveled. The torpedoes did not detonate. Their matter-antimatter warheads simply ceased to have coherent states. Then the ships themselves. One moment they were bristling icons of Cathar supremacy. The next, they were smears of radiation and rapidly cooling vapor. It was not destruction, it was decreation." Vorlag finally turned his heavy head, his gaze settling on the Grand Marshal. "And the species responsible, the ones who built this anomaly? Human," Xyler spat the word as if it were poison. "A minor race from the Orion Spur, barely interstellar. Their records show them to be fractured, prone to internal conflict, their technology a messy patchwork of a dozen competing philosophies. They are not builders of fleets. They are traders, explorers, noisy little primates who fill the calm channels with their art and their endless, pointless philosophies. We underestimated them. We saw them as a nuisance, a culture to be eventually absorbed or brushed aside. Instead, they have forged a dagger of impossible physics and plunged it into the heart of our navy." The Grand Marshal's posture radiated a righteous fury, a desperate need for an enemy he could understand, a foe that could be met on a battlefield and broken. But the entity described in the reports was not a foe. It was a law of physics that had taken sides. How could one declare war on a concept? "An underestimation does not explain this," Vorlag countered, his voice low and firm. To leap from crude fission-powered vessels to a craft that can dismantle reality itself is not a matter of technological progression. It is a transfiguration. It is as if a grub, instead of pupating into a moth, suddenly became a star. There is a piece of this narrative we do not possess, a vast, critical piece. Alara shifted in her alcove, the shadows moving with her. In the old text, before the Great Unification, it was said that there were entities that swam in the currents between worlds, the deep streams of causality, the void whales. They were not hostile, but to cross their path was to be unwritten from time. A myth, of course, a story to frighten hatchlings. Her ancient eyes seemed to glow faintly in the dimness. But all myths are the fossilized remains of a forgotten truth. Perhaps these humans did not build a weapon. Perhaps they found one. Or perhaps, she paused, letting the weight of her words settle, they angered something they should not have. Xyler rejected this instantly. No, the vessel bears their signature, however faint, a specific quantum resonance unique to their star system. It is theirs. This is not a cosmic beast or an ancient artifact. It is a deliberate act of war by a species that has hidden its true nature behind a facade of primitive chaos. They have shown their hand. We must crush that hand before it can form a fist. I have already drafted the orders. The Grand Armada can be mobilized. We will sterilize their home world and every colony they have clawed from the dirt. We will burn their name from the galactic record. And what if this vessel is waiting at their home world? Vorlag asked, the question hanging cold and sharp in the air. What will your Grand Armada do, Marshal? Fire upon it and watch as our mightiest ships are unmade like poorly woven tapestries. You propose to charge a fortress whose walls are the laws of reality itself. Your solution is to strike the anvil with a glass hammer, harder this time, in the hopes that it will be the anvil that shatters. The fury in Xyler's posture deflated, replaced by the grim tautness of a warrior facing a problem that had no solution in violence. He knew Vorlag was right. The very foundation of Cathar military doctrine, overwhelming, concentrated, and decisive force, was meaningless. It was like trying to punch a ghost. Worse, it was like punching a ghost and having your own arm evaporate. The silence returned, deeper this time, filled with the unspoken horror of their own impotence. For the first time in millennia, the Cathar Consortium, masters of a quarter of the galaxy, was afraid. They had encountered a power that did not play by the rules of their universe, and they had no idea what it wanted, where it came from, or what it would do next. The weeping nebula in the hologram spun on, a silent testament to a question they could not answer, a war they could not fight. The grand chamber, designed to project power and certainty, had become a cage of their own fear and ignorance. Days passed, measured in the slow, deliberate rotation of the holographic star map. The Cathar Consortium held its breath. Fleets were recalled to core systems, defensive perimeters fortified, and a pall of uncertainty settled over the 1,000 worlds. Xyler's thirst for retribution was held in check by Vorlag's unyielding demand for caution, for information. To strike blindly was to invite annihilation. To do nothing was to rot from within, consumed by fear of a phantom. The High Council remained in session, the three leaders locked in a state of suspended crisis, waiting for the other claw to drop. The silence was broken not by a report of another attack, but by something far more unsettling. A message. It did not arrive through the standard hypercom channels, which were being monitored with a paranoia bordering on psychosis. It bloomed into existence within the Cathar's most secure military network, bypassing layers of quantum encryption as if they were simple beaded curtains. It was not a demand or a threat. It was an invitation. The message was purely mathematical. It began with the universal constants, the speed of light, the Planck length, the gravitational constant, and built from there, establishing a common language of physics. It then moved into complex, elegant equations that described the very fabric of spacetime, equations that Cathar physicists had only theorized, proofs they had sought for centuries. It was a display of intellectual superiority, so profound it was almost insulting. And at the end of this breathtaking cascade of cosmic truth was a symbol. A set of coordinates and a time stamp, a proposed meeting, in the very system where the Ninth Fleet had met its end. A trap, Xyler stated, his voice flat. He had reviewed the message a dozen times, his finest cryptographers and physicists poring over it. The consensus was unnerving. The mathematics were flawless, even predictive. They contained solutions to problems the Cathar had wrestled with for generations, from FTL energy efficiency to the nature of dark matter. It was like a god casually offering a glimpse of its thoughts. Perhaps, Vorlag conceded, his multifaceted eyes tracing the elegant curves of a particularly complex equation displayed on the main screen. Or it is a gesture, a key. They did not have to reveal this level of understanding. They could have sent a simple binary request. This is a statement. They are telling us they operate on a level we are only beginning to comprehend. They are boasting of their power before they use it again, Xyler countered, though his conviction was beginning to fray. The message did not feel hostile. It felt academic, clinical, like a scholar inviting a student to a lecture on the student's own impending demise. Ilara, who had been meditating in her alcove, finally spoke. The message does not contain the signature of the vessel that destroyed the fleet. Vorlag and Xyler turned to her. What do you mean? Vorlag asked. The quantum resonance, she explained patiently. The faint signature that identified the anomaly as human in origin is absent from this transmission. This message is clean. It comes directly from their home system. This is not the weapon speaking to us. This is the hand that built it. A long, contemplative silence followed as the implications settled. The humans were not just a monolith. There was the entity in the field, and there was the civilization at home. They were now being invited to speak to the latter. We must go, Vorlag declared, the decision solidifying in his mind. To refuse is to admit fear, to ignore it is to remain in ignorance, and ignorance in this new reality is a death sentence. I will go myself. Xyler was on his feet in an instant. High Counselor, that is madness. You cannot place yourself in their hands. Send an emissary, a drone, anything but the head of the consortium. And what would a drone learn? Vorlag retorted, his gaze firm. It would receive a pre-packaged message. It could not read intent, could not feel the weight of their words, could not make the judgment calls that will be required. No, this requires presence. It requires the full authority of this council. They have extended a hand, whether it holds a peace offering or a blade, I will be the one to find out. He looked at the Grand Marshal, his expression softening slightly. Your duty, Marshal, is to prepare for the worst. Assume this is a trap. Assume I will not return, but my duty is to explore the possibility that it is not. The journey to the Tartarus Nebula, the graveyard of the Ninth Fleet, was a tense and silent affair. Vorlag traveled on a single unarmed diplomatic courier, the Unwavering Gaze Asterisk. It was a vessel designed for speed and observation, not for combat. To arrive in a warship would be to admit they still believed this situation could be solved with weaponry, a foolish and suicidal assumption. He was accompanied by a small contingent of guards and aides, but for all intents and purposes he was alone, a single Cathar moving toward the source of his people's greatest terror. As they dropped out of hyperspace at the designated coordinates, the nebula filled the view screen, a celestial tapestry of blues and purples. It was beautiful and serene, belying the violence that had occurred within it. And there, hanging silently in the void, were two vessels. One was instantly recognizable from the fragmented sensor data, the crystalline sliver, the shard of impossible light. It seemed to passively radiate a sense of profound stillness, space itself curving around it in a way that made the mind ache. It was not there so much as the universe was making room for it. The other vessel was much more conventional. It was clearly of human design, a long, elegant spindle of white and gray plating, adorned with sensor arrays and communication dishes. It was larger than their courier, but it was dwarfed by the memory of the Cathar warships that had perished here. It had no visible weapon ports. Like their own vessel, it was a gesture of non-aggression. From this second ship a message came, this time in perfectly translated Cathar standard. This is the human diplomatic vessel Solace Asterisk. We welcome you, High Counselor Vorlag. We are prepared to receive you when you are ready. The calm professionalism was more disquieting than any threat. There was no arrogance, no triumph, just a quiet, waiting patience. Vorlag felt a chill creep through his carapace. These were not the primitive, chaotic beings his intelligence Orts had described. He boarded a small shuttle, his personal guard flanking him, and crossed the void between the ships. The human vessel's docking bay was clean, brightly lit, and pressurized with an atmosphere breathable to both species. A single human figure was waiting for him. He was shorter than a Cathar and fragile-looking in his simple, dark blue uniform. His face was pale, his hair dark, and his eyes, small and dark, held an expression that Vorlag could not decipher. It was not hostility, nor was it fear. It was a deep, profound sadness. High Counselor Vorlag, the human said, his voice calm and even, the translator in his ear rendering the Cathar words with perfect inflection. I am Ambassador Chen. On behalf of the Terran Confederacy, I offer you our deepest, most sincere condolences for the loss of your fleet and the lives within it. The statement was so utterly unexpected that for a moment, Vorlag was rendered speechless. Condolences. From the architect of their destruction, his mind reeled. This was a tactic he could not comprehend. Was it mockery? A display of such supreme confidence that they could feign sympathy for their victims? Your condolences, Vorlag finally managed, his own voice tight with suspicion. Your weapon annihilated our forces without provocation. Ambassador Chen's expression tightened with what looked like genuine pain. High Counselor, what you encountered here was not a weapon. We would never build such a thing. You're not a race of warriors. We are and have always been a race of scientists and engineers. He gestured for Vorlag to walk with him, leading him from the docking bay into a wide, pristine corridor. Please allow me to explain. What happened here was a tragedy, a catastrophic, unintentional tragedy. They entered a spacious observation lounge. One entire wall was a transparent pane looking out at the nebula and the crystalline ship, which hung in the distance like a sliver of polished diamond. We call that vessel the asterisk stitch in time asterisk, Chen began, his gaze fixed on the impossible object. And its name is a literal description of its function. It is not a warship, High Counselor. It is a tool, a medical instrument on a scale I believe your people have not yet conceived. Vorlag remained silent, his mind racing, trying to parse the human's words. A medical instrument. Our understanding of cosmology has advanced in recent centuries, Chen continued, his tone that of a lecturer explaining a complex but vital concept. We discovered that space-time is not a perfect, uniform fabric. It is subject to stresses, to decay. It can develop lesions, weak points, places where the barrier between our reality and the raw, unstructured chaos outside of it grows thin. These lesions, if left untreated, can rupture. The results are catastrophic. A rupture would not just destroy a star or a planet. It would unravel the laws of physics in that entire sector, a cascading failure that could potentially sterilize a spiral arm. He turned from the window to face Vorlag directly. The asterisk stitch in time is a reality suture. It travels to these lesions, and through the precise manipulation of gravitational and quantum forces on a scale that is difficult to describe, it reinforces the fabric of reality. It stitches the wound closed. It is the most delicate, dangerous, and vital work our people have ever undertaken. Vorlag stared at the human, then at the crystalline ship, the pieces clicking into place with a horrifying, sickening clarity. The Tartarus Nebula is the site of a particularly large and unstable lesion, Chen finished grimly. The asterisk stitch in time was in the middle of a critical phase of its operation when your Ninth Fleet arrived. The process requires exposing the raw substrate of reality for a brief period. It is a moment of supreme vulnerability for both the vessel and the universe itself. He looked at Vorlag, his sad eyes conveying the terrible conclusion. Your fleet, seeing a massive and unknown energy reading, did what any military force would do. It acted to neutralize a perceived threat. They opened fire. Vorlag felt a wave of cold dread wash over him, so profound it was like being submerged in icy water. He finally understood. Their energy weapons did not strike the ship, Chen explained softly. They struck the exposed wound in space-time. They poured trillions of joules of coherent energy directly into the raw engine of creation. The feedback was instantaneous. The laws of cause and effect of matter and energy, which were already under immense strain, simply broke down in their vicinity. Your ships were not destroyed by us, High Counselor. Their own power, reflected back upon them by the fundamental nature of the universe they were trying to harm, unmade them. We could do nothing but watch. We broadcasted warnings on every frequency, in every language we knew, but in the chaos of battle they were not received or not understood. It was terrible accident. The truth was a blow more powerful than any weapon. It was a complete inversion of their reality. They were not victims of a monstrous new enemy. They were the authors of their own demise, killed by their own aggression, their own lack of understanding. The shame of it was a physical weight, pressing down on Vorlag, threatening to crush him. The Cathar, the proud, the mighty, the masters of warfare had been undone not by an enemy, but by their own hubris. They had fired their cannons at the operating table of a surgeon who was trying to save them. Why? Vorlag asked, the word a hoarse whisper. Why tell us this? You hold a power that makes us insignificant. You could have let us believe you were gods of destruction. You could have demanded our submission. Why reveal this vulnerability, this truth? Ambassador Chen gave a small, weary smile. Because we are not conquerors, High Counselor, and because we did not seek this power. It was forced upon us by a truth far more terrifying than any war. The lesion in this nebula is not an isolated event. It is a symptom of a much larger illness. He gestured to the observation window again, but this time he tapped a control panel. The view of the nebula dissolved, replaced by a holographic map of the entire galaxy. It was a familiar sight to Vorlag, but Chen directed his attention to the outer fringes, the distant, unexplored arms. We are a young species, Chen said, his voice dropping to a near whisper filled with a gravity that transcended the sterile room. When we first reached for the stars, we were looking for life, for wonders. Instead, we found silence. Not the absence of life, but the record of its passing. We found evidence of countless civilizations, many far older and more advanced than yours or mine. and they were all gone, vanished without a trace of conflict. No shattered worlds, no stellar ruins, just empty planets with silent, perfectly preserved cities. It was a mystery that consumed us, the Great Silence we called it. On the map, Chen highlighted vast swaths of the galactic rim. They began to slowly, subtly darken, a creeping shadow that seemed to stain the starfield. It took us centuries to understand. We were looking for an enemy, a cataclysm, but the cause was far more fundamental. It is a process, a natural, cosmic process of decay, but one that is accelerating, a kind of entropy of reality itself. We call it the fraying. The very laws that hold the universe together are growing weaker at the fringes. Stars are not exploding, they are simply dissolving. Planets are not shattering, their matter is losing coherence. Entire civilizations are being unwritten from existence, not with a bang, but with a slow, inexorable fade to nothing. Vorlag stared at the map, his 4 lower hands gripping the railing in front of him. He saw the shadow now, the slow, relentless tide of absolute nothingness creeping inward from the void. The lesion here in their part of the galaxy was not a random occurrence. It was a forward symptom. The sickness was spreading. The asterisk stitch in time and its sister vessels are not weapons of war, Chen said, his voice thick with the weight of his civilization's burden. They are our answer to the Great Silence. They are a desperate, galaxy-spanning effort to hold back the end of everything. We are not warriors. We are custodians. We are menders. We work in the dark at the edge of oblivion, trying to patch the wounds in a dying universe. We hid our true capabilities because to reveal them would be to invite panic, or worse, to attract the attention of those who would see this power as a weapon, just as your fleet did. The cost of that misunderstanding was a tragedy we will mourn for the rest of our history. He finally turned to look Vorlag in the eyes, and for the first time the Cathar High Counselor truly understood the expression he saw there. It was not sadness. It was the infinite weariness of a people who had looked into the ultimate abyss and had chosen not to flee, but to stand their ground and fight a war that could never truly be won, only postponed. "We have revealed this to you, High Counselor," Chen said, his voice quiet but resolute, "because we can no longer do this alone. The fraying is accelerating. We need partners. We need allies who understand the true nature of the struggle ahead. The war for the galaxy is not against each other. It is against the slow, silent death of reality itself. And it is a war we are losing." The journey back to Cathar Prime was a silent one, but it was a different silence than before. The silence of ignorance and fear had been replaced by the crushing silence of comprehension. When Vorlag stood before the High Council once more, the holographic nebula had been replaced by the image of the galaxy, the encroaching darkness of the fraying starkly visible. He recounted everything he had learned, his voice steady, his words precise. He laid bare the trut. of the Ninth Fleet's demise, the nature of the human warship, and the terrible cosmic secret it was built to combat. When he finished, the sanctum was as quiet as a tomb. Grand Marshal Xyler stood as still as a statue, his crimson armor seeming to have lost its luster. His entire existence, his very identity as a warrior, had been predicated on the idea of a definable, defeatable foe. He had spent his life preparing for wars of territory and ideology. How was he to fight a war against the concept of decay? Against the universe simply giving up? The very foundations of his honor, his purpose, had crumbled to dust. Lorekeeper Alara was the first to speak, her voice a soft whisper that nonetheless filled the vast chamber. "The void wails," she breathed. "The myths were true, not creatures, but a force, a process, the unwriting. We were so proud of our mastery over the material world that we never thought to look at the integrity of the page on which it was all written." She looked at Vorlag, her ancient eyes seeming to see not just him, but the long, dark road ahead. "They are young, these humans, and yet they have shouldered a burden that would have broken older, prouder races, a burden we did not even know existed." Xyler finally moved. He slowly unclasped the ceremonial plasma blade from his hip, the symbol of his office as Grand Marshal, the ultimate instrument of Cathar military might. He laid it gently on the council table, the weapon that could crack a continent now looking like a child's toy. "My fleets are useless," he said, his voice hollowed out, stripped of all its former fire. "My strategies are meaningless. My entire life's work is a monument to a lesser form of conflict." He looked at Vorlag, not with defiance, but with a plea for direction. "What they have built, this suture, is the only weapon that matters in this new war, and we do not know how to build it. We do not even understand the principles behind it." "No," Vorlag said, his voice resonating with a newfound purpose. "We do not, but we understand other things, logistics on a galactic scale, material fabrication, resource allocation. We are masters of organization and mobilization. The humans have the knowledge, we have the industrial and political might to apply it." He stepped forward, placing one of his hands on the Grand Marshal's shoulder. Your fleets are not useless, Xyler. Their purpose has simply changed. They will no longer be instruments of conquest. They will be the tools of preservation. They will guard the suture ships. They will chart the decay. They will transport the scientists and materials needed to build more. You will not be a warrior who takes. You will be a guardian who protects. A new understanding passed between them, the birth of a new philosophy for an entire civilization. The Cathar way of overwhelming force was not being discarded. It was being reforged, repurposed for a war far grander and more desperate than any they had ever imagined. The first joint conference between the Terran Confederacy and the Cathar Consortium was held on a neutral station built in the orbit of a quiet, stable star. Ambassador Chen and High Counselor Vorlag met again, not as potential adversaries, but as the architects of a new and unprecedented alliance. They were joined by the greatest minds of both species, human physicists and Cathar engineers, Terran cosmologists and Cathar logisticians. The humans shared everything. They held nothing back. They opened their archives, revealing the full extent of their research into the fraying. They showed the Cathar the slow, agonizing process of their discoveries, the centuries of dead ends and failed theories that had finally led them to the desperate solution of the reality sutures. The Cathar, for their part, listened with a humility that was utterly alien to their nature. They absorbed the information, their pragmatic, organizational minds immediately seeing ways to improve, to scale up, to accelerate the human efforts. In a vast, shared holographic chamber, Chen and Vorlag stood before a new map of the galaxy. It was no longer a political map of territories and borders. It was a medical chart showing the spread of the disease. Red zones marked active lesions. Yellow zones indicated areas of space-time instability. Faint, ghostly outlines showed the projected path of the decay. Our models show the fraying is not uniform, a human scientist explained, her voice echoing in the chamber. It seems to emanate from a point somewhere beyond the galactic boundary, the Great Attractor region, but its progress is not random. It seems to follow patterns, channels, almost like a river delta. Lorekeeper Alara, observing the conference from Cathar Prime, had her acolytes scour the most ancient star charts in the Consortium's archives, charts that predated their own interstellar travel, inherited from a long-vanished precursor race. Cross-referencing the human data with ancient maps, she made a discovery that sent a ripple of shock through the new alliance. The channels, she announced, her voice trembling with the weight of her discovery. The paths of decay, they are not natural. They align perfectly with the hyperlane network of the precursors, an empire that vanished without a trace over 1,000,000 years ago. The implication was staggering. The fraying was not a purely natural phenomenon. It was flowing along the ancient, artificial pathways carved through spacetime by a civilization of unimaginable power. It was as if their FTL highways had become conduits for the universe's end. Ambassador Chen's face went pale. Did they cause it? Did their technology somehow trigger the decay? Or, Vorlag mused, his mind turning the problem over and over, were they trying to escape it? Did they build this network to flee, only to inadvertently hasten its spread into our galaxy? The mystery deepened, but a new focus emerged. The source. The origin point beyond the galaxy. With their combined resources, the new alliance began to construct a new kind of instrument. Not a suture to mend the wounds, but a probe. A vessel designed to travel outside the galactic plane, to follow the channels of decay back to their source, to see what lay at the heart of the Great Silence. It was the boldest, most desperate gamble in the history of two species. Years later, Vorlag and Chen stood together on the bridge of the Cathar flagship, the Indomitable will a vessel that had once been the pinnacle of their war machine. It was now part of a vast, combined fleet escorting the newly christened probe, the Seeker of Dawn on its journey to the galactic edge. Grand Marshal Xyler commanded the fleet, his crimson armor now a symbol not of conquest, but of solemn duty. The Seeker was a fusion of human and Cathar design, a testament to their new unity. Its core was a human-designed observational instrument of impossible sensitivity, encased in a Cathar-forged hull of unparalleled resilience. It was the ultimate expression of their shared purpose. As the fleet reached the very last star system at the galaxy's edge, the Seeker prepared for its final jump into the intergalactic void. On the bridge of the Indomitable will a final message arrived from the probe just before it departed. It wasn't a status report or a farewell. It was a data packet, automatically triggered by its long-range sensors as they peered into the profound darkness ahead. An image resolved on the main view screen. It was faint, distorted by distance and the warping of spacetime, but it was unmistakable. It was a structure. a single, colossal object floating in the absolute emptiness between galaxies. It was impossibly vast, a lattice of black, geometric shapes that seemed to absorb the light of distant galactic clusters. And from its center, a single, repeating signal pulsed, a message that had been broadcasting for eons, finally deciphered by the probe's advanced systems. It was not a warning. It was not a distress call. It was a welcome. The translated text appeared below the image, stark and chilling against the backdrop of the void. "The work is done. The bridge is open. At long last, we can return home." Vorlag and Chen stared at the screen, the silence on the bridge absolute. The fraying, the decay of their reality was not an accident. It was not a natural process. It was engineering. The precursors had not fled a dying universe. They had been unmaking it, deliberately unraveling the fabric of spacetime to create a gateway, a bridge to somewhere else. And now something was waiting to cross over. The enemy was not the slow, indifferent death of the cosmos. The enemy was alive, it was patient, and it had just been told the door was open. The war for survival had just begun.